poor little AMC, by 1980, it really had run out of capital to fund new vehicle programs. And AMC had really been in some challenging financial straits. Interestingly, ever since they acquired the Jeep brand from Kaiser in the early 1970s. Well, that sounds very strange to say today because the SUV craze couldn't be larger. Everybody pretty much drives an SUV today. Back in the early 1970s, well, that just wasn't the case. AMC saw a lot of promise with the Jeep brand, but it didn't really take off until the early 1990s. Maybe you could even argue 1984 with the introduction of the XJ Cherokee or the Grand Cherokee in the early 1990s. But back in the 70s, Jeeps were just not something that people thought of as daily drivers, especially when the first OPEC embargo hit in 1973. In order to acquire Jeep, AMC took on a significant amount of debt, which it had to service, and that took away a lot of its cash flow and ability to really fund new programs. And then that was further compounded by, let's just say, the flop of the 1974 Matador Coupe that you see here. While the Matador sedan was a relative sales success, unfortunately, particularly with fleets like police vehicles as well as taxi cabs, the Matador Coupe, AMC spent a lot of money on the design for it, and it just was a total bomb. The Pacer was another vehicle that, when it was introduced in 1975, it actually had a fair degree of sales success in that first year. But as the buyers who really wanted the Pacer started to peter out after the 1975 model year, the sales of the Pacer also tailed off, certainly by 1980. In this environment, AMC was trying to reinvent some of the rest of its lineup with very little capital because it just didn't have much. And so the styling team at AMC, led by Dick Teague, came out with the Concorde for 1978, which was really just a warmed-over Hornet, and the Spirit for 1979, which was really just a warmed-over Gremlin. So they were trying, and the Concorde actually, again, was another little sales success. But the main sales success that AMC would have in 1980 would be a new vehicle that would be the 1980 AMC Eagle. Now, the AMC Eagle story actually begins back in the early 1970s when Jeep chief engineer Roy Lunn was thinking about how he could develop a vehicle that would employ Jeep's four-wheel drive, but do so on a typical sedan or wagon chassis. And there were some prototype vehicles during that time, really Hornet sportabout wagons, that had Jeep transfer cases. And Roy Lunn was just kind of testing out this technology to see if they could make it work. Well, unfortunately, the transfer cases that were employed by Jeep in the early 1970s were pretty noisy and were rather crude, and so this was just thought not to be a practical idea because it was felt that customers would find the overall driving experience not to be as pleasurable as AMC had hoped. However, by the late 1970s, Jeep was in process of sourcing a new transfer case made by New Process that was very refined for the time and had a viscous coupling that enabled it to have full-time four-wheel drive. So on many vehicles today, you'll notice that there's an auto setting on the dial to go from two-wheel to four-wheel drive, and if you want the four-wheel drive to automatically kick in, you put it in the auto setting. That is still a part-time four-wheel drive system, but it's just activated automatically. You cannot leave your vehicle engaged in four-wheel drive full-time on dry pavement. It will really strain the four-wheel drive system if you're going around a corner, for instance, on dry pavement. But this setup was completely different, and it was very refined and allowed for full-time four-wheel drive usage. What could be better? And it was also relatively lightweight. It had low NVH, or noise, vibration, and harshness. And as a result, some prototypes were made of what would become the AMC Eagle. Now, before we go on to talk more about the Eagle, let's just spend one moment on Roy Lunn, because this is a very interesting individual. I think people who know his name know him for the fact that he was really leading Jeep engineering during this time frame and helped develop the Eagle. But Roy Lunn was even more than that when it came to being an engineer. He actually came from Ford Motor Company before AMC, where he worked on the GT40 that won Le Mans from 1966 to 1969. So you got a guy who was really working on a Ford GT40, now working on the AMC Eagle. To say he was talented would definitely be an understatement. Lunn would later recount the story of how he sourced this particular transfer case with the viscous fluid in it from a company called FF Developments, a British company. And he would end up getting a prototype made of the Eagle really by sending over a AMC vehicle to GKN, who then developed the prototype in conjunction with FF Developments. It was really this transfer case that enabled AMC to go forward with production, as it was so smooth and really you didn't notice any additional noise, vibration, and harshness in the vehicle. The production of the transfer case would then be sourced stateside to New Process, which was a division of Chrysler Corporation, and the single-speed transfer case, these AMC Eagles didn't have a low or high speed, was known as the NP119. It would prove to be a wonderful invention indeed, and I would say, to be honest, it's still more advanced than many of the four-wheel drive setups on vehicles today that are part-time four-wheel drive. Now to the designs for the AMC Eagle that was introduced in 1980. Let's take a look at this coupe here. I find this one interesting because it definitely looks like the final version of the AMC Eagle in many ways. By the way, notice that the front bumper is relatively close to the vehicle as opposed to on the Concords where it was further away from the vehicle. Why is that? Well, the AMC Eagle was able to be classified as a truck, and so it didn't have to meet the 5-mile-an-hour bumper impact standards. And so I guess AMC saved a little money on the bumper systems, but they were also able to pull the bumper in closer to the car. Now, notice the badge on the front of this Eagle mock-up, and it says Pathfinder. This was going to be the name before it was later changed to Eagle. I'm not quite sure why that was, but at least you know the Pathfinder name was considered. Now let's discuss a little bit about this interesting design that you see here, very angular and crisp design. This was, well, what? This was actually going to be a design for the refreshed Concorde Eagle that was supposed to come out around 1984. Of course, that clearly never happened, and the design was shelved. But interestingly, a number of elements from the old vehicle were able to be reused on this particular design. However, you can tell that the roofline is all new. I believe that the fenders, as well as the hood and the front door and the door lowers, are the same on these vehicles as the 1980 version Eagle and the 78 AMC Concorde. But, well, there's obviously some significant capital expense associated with the roofline here, as well as the door uppers. And my sense is that by this point, AMC just didn't have the money and decided to shelve this design. Notice also in this particular prototype that there are two different wheel designs, one on the front and one on the back. The back one would end up becoming production on the Eagle with the little 4 and 4 logo on it. I don't know that I saw the front one. There was a different aluminum wheel that would come out for the Eagle and the Concorde as an available option. But this formal roofline was very much in keeping with the times, as well as that half-toupee vinyl top. And that roofline, I guess you could say, was really dictated by the success of the 1976 to 1979 Seville, which then General Motors copied and Chrysler copied with their K cars, and even Ford copied, starting with the Panther platform introduction in 1979. That was just kind of the style for the times, these very crisp, so-called sheer look designs that actually had their roots back in overseas designs of the early 1970s. But obviously American designers adopted them for the tastes stateside. Now out back you can see that this crisp design theme continued onto the rear, where the taillights were supposed to get this new kind of 3 taillight look with the reverse lights in the middle. It was, I think, a bit more plain than what the original Eagle had been, and I don't know that it would have been all that well received. I guess it was thought to be more contemporary, and that's why AMC was looking to do it on this refresh for 84. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, it was not to be, and because of AMC's financial troubles during this time, AMC chief executive Jerry Myers was really searching for a partner that could help inject capital into AMC and also provide them with a small car, a true small car that they didn't have in the marketplace. They just didn't have the money to develop. And at this point, he decided to tie up with Renault. And the story is kind of history from there. Wouldn't be too much later that Chrysler would end up buying AMC in the late 1980s, principally for the Jeep brand. And the rest of the AMC lineup didn't really continue for very long, although Chrysler did launch an Eagle division that was launched to produce really what were legacy Renault vehicles that AMC was trying to bring over. And the Eagle division would have vehicles like the Eagle Medallion and the Eagle Premier that were supposed to be AMC badged vehicles, and they really just were warmed over Renaults. In any case, it just didn't turn out, unfortunately. But it's too bad. If AMC could have just held on a little longer, AMC actually developed the Grand Cherokee by and large, and Chrysler had shelved it for a number of years before introducing it in the early 1990s. But if they had been able to come out with that, I wonder if they would have been able to make it, because they were certainly a super innovative company and produced a lot of great vehicles. By the way, if you're interested in learning more about AMC, I highly recommend books by Patrick Foster. He does a great job writing about American motors, has wrote a number of history books. You can find his books online. And also, if you're looking to see a lot of AMC vehicles, visit the Rambler Ranch. It's in Elizabeth, Colorado. You can go to ramblerranch.com and check it out. But as I said, also check out the books by Patrick Foster on AMC. He does, again, just a great job writing them. This is not a paid endorsement. I'm just letting you know, if you're an AMC fanatic, where you can find some additional information. Thanks again for watching.